All righty, it is 3 o'clock, so I do want to respect and honor each of your time and afternoon that you've given today. So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you all for joining us. It is Monday, June 6th, 3 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. Thank you to my board colleagues, Superintendent Dr. Stubblefield, to all of our staff that are joining us, and to any guests that we may have watching us today. Thanks for being with us. So we'll go ahead and read our board norms and protocols. As we do at every board meeting, we agree to respect the differences of opinions in making decisions for the district, to follow best practices in managing the superintendent and the management of the board itself, to stay on task when conducting business for the district, including while at board meetings, to never surprise the superintendent or each other when conducting official business of the district, to read these norms at the beginning of each board meeting and at board workshops as a reminder of how to conduct our meetings, and to continually self-check to determine if we are following our norms when conducting district business. Again, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I will ask Ms. Smith to please do a roll call.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, present.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, present.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie Humphreys, present.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, present.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, present.
Rachel Russell. Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, present.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Next, I'd entertain a motion to approve today's special agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie Humphreys, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, board, again for making time today. So we'll just jump right into our agenda. First up, recommended that the Board of Education approve the HR report and recommendations as submitted by Sam Reed Devon, Associate Superintendent of HR, is recommended by Dr. Anna Stubblefield, Superintendent of Schools.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie Humphreys, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda, recommended that the Kansas City, Kansas Board of Education approve the Safe and Secure Schools Grant application as submitted by Tracy Kaiser, Executive Director of Business Operations, and recommended by Dr. Anna Stubblefield, Superintendent of Schools. Board, this came prior to us at a previous board meeting, and I know we wanted to have conversation or discussion or just get a little more input on this grant. So it's back before us this afternoon. The deadline to submit, I believe, is June 10th, so this Friday. So if there was any feedback or any questions, I know Dr. Stubblefield and team submitted some information for us to take into consideration. So would either open up to go ahead and either act on the recommendation. I know there may be some questions as well, so I do want to make sure we have time for that.
So are you opening up for questions? What are you doing?
Well, if there's an action to approve, and then we can open up for discussion, or if there's questions right off the bat, please go ahead and ask any questions or thoughts. Dr. Nguyen, do you have any thoughts? I wasn't sure if you
Sure. Number one, question is, why is there no outside lighting mentioned? Number two, we just spent, I think it was $4 million on lighting for gyms. So why would there need to be any additional for lighting? And three, why is it not covering, well, lighting in the, well, I'll put it like this. personally, I want anyone who thinks about vandalizing or committing any crime on our properties to know that the lighting in all the parking lots is more than adequate and that there's cameras. And I don't get that assurance in this application.
Is Doug on, or Tracy or that group? I'm not sure if they can talk about, because there are some places that we already do have adequate lighting and cameras, and my understanding these were additional places that we would need it. In the application, for the most part, it would be general and vague for safety and security reasons around the cameras, but if they can fill in the gaps about the general global, here's what we're saying, I'll let them go.
Right, I understand that, but there's not even a mention about outside lighting. So if that's deliberate to suggest that all outside lighting is adequate, then fine. That's a conversation that you can say right now publicly. But the other question, as far as about gymnasiums, we just spent $4 million. So why is there an additional need for lighting in gyms? Excuse me, this may not be just lighting. Is it lighting or is it just cameras?
Cameras. The
And
gym.
I can jump in and help answer some of those questions. With the quick turnaround we had for this grant, we had discussed lighting, but there really wasn't adequate time to be able to get really specific information, and we didn't want to submit a grant that didn't have the details. So we decided just to go ahead and ask for the cameras at this point, and then if we have additional lighting needs, that could either come through our normal capital outlay, or we could possibly apply for a different grant down the future.
Thank you.
Ms. Russell?
I think Tracy just answered my question. The last update that I saw on the actual grant application was that it was only for 25 cameras, or it was just for cameras in hallways of elementary schools. And so I just wanted to be clear. I heard the lighting conversation and other needs. So I just want to make sure that I'm very clear of what it is the ask is. The other piece is around the financial piece. It said 50% match on multiple things. That's what was communicated. But when I looked at the grant, it says it's dollar for dollar. So I just want to make sure that's where I'm coming from. Is I just want to be clear that we all 7 of us have an absolute clear understanding of what it is that's being asked of us. Is it hallways, lighting? There was a conversation around a system at the last board meeting. And then on the request, I saw that it was only like 220 something that we were asking, but I thought we were told we could go for 500,000. So I think I'm just very unclear. And I know a lot has been happening as the timeline is coming up, and I'm moving targets and all of these things as well as that. So I just really, really, really want someone to clear, who knows exactly what is happening, to say, this is what we're buying. This is the match that the district has. And yes.
Yes, Ms. Russell, I can answer those. We are asking to replace 336 indoor and outdoor cameras that are of a low resolution, that are outdated, and then an additional 198 cameras in 25 elementary schools and hallways, gyms, and areas where there are not current cameras. TIS went through and evaluated our needs, and that was the information they specifically came back with. And it is, as we were going through the grant process, we learned it is a dollar-to-dollar match. So we were asking for $230,000 in grant funding, and then a local match from capital outlay of $230,000.
Thank you, Tracy. Chief Nicholson?
Yeah, I just wanted to add just one quick thing. So I was only involved in one of these conversations, which was last week, which is my first week, but there was a lot of discussion around the lighting on the outside of the buildings where we have some deficiencies and where the lighting is not adequate for our cameras to pick up if there's vandalism or theft going on. So that was the biggest bulk of the conversation when it comes to the lighting portion of it, that to my knowledge.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes, Ms. Humphries.
I'd like to move to approve the grant application.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. I'll open it up for questions and discussion.
So Randy, so based on two things, one that Mr. Nicholson just noted, Dr. Stubblefield, then that will be addressed at another conversation?
Yes, and part of that conversation will have to be done in executive session because for them to disclose where it might
Okay,
not.
we
And
all
that
understand
would-
that.
Yeah, so yeah,
Okay.
that will be an additional conversation as new people transition in to address those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay, and we will have this within the next 30 days while we're talking budget, correct?
Yes. Well, if the
Okay.
capital outlay budget, yes, we can, definitely. Yes.
Okay, and number two, then the second part of the narrative involved Chief Nicholson about the potential use of funds for additional SROs, XYZ. So is that going to be included in the application as a placeholder so that when then we are awarded, we can then have that discussion that will perhaps swap out some of the funds for lighting and use funds for SROs?
So and Tracy or someone may be able to speak on, when we were looking at it, and I did send in the Friday update, the two options for additional SROs and the cost around that, if you were going to have them on all the campuses. And then Chief Nicholson also put together an option that was more of a combination option with adding more cars and patrols to elementary because of the necessity to have a larger discussion around that Tracy and the group that was there just focused on the cameras because that's the information that they actually had at the time. The actual cost, because we were operating off of really rough estimates around the SROs, the cost of an SRO. And then Chief Nicholson's actual recommendation was in the grant, you can ask for additional cars, which is more of a one time, like if we were going to do that, that was his recommendation. So because it was all of those things on there, like we can add some additional patrol cars, or if the board gives us direction to add the cost of the SRO, that just needed to be flushed out based off what model we would go with. And because Chief Nicholson only been here since last week, what I sent was what it would cost to do either option, but it still needs to be flushed out some more, is why it's not included in the grant.
Okay, I understand that, but included in then the grant application was a sheet that noted SROs. So are you saying that sheet will not be included, or that sheet will be included as a placeholder?
Did I miss that? I apologize. I did not see SROs on.
There's no narrative. There's just a third piece.
Yes. The three options were the SROs, the camera security technology, and secured entrances. So if the board would like us to add SROs, we sure can. based on Chief Nicholson's recommendations. But last week we did not add that, but this is a draft application if you guys would like us to change it.
What I'm suggesting and asking, is it possible, because we are not at a point today meeting a Friday deadline to choose staffing 1, 2, or 3, but that can it be a placeholder in the application, or do you have to specify the amount dedicated to an SRO staffing? Can it be included as a placeholder?
We could add it. We would need definitely the specifics, what we're requesting. The thing is, though, is if they would approve it, then we would be committed to following through with that and adding the matching funds.
What I would think
what they shared. So Tracy, I just want to be clear. So if we were talking about the cameras, and the cameras are $460,000. If we were going to add SRO, it would be up to $70,000, and then that maybe one additional one. Is that our option? Or because I just want clarity. If we do add it, what is the maximum that we can go up to based off the information that you received, with them saying the max any district may get is between for matching like $250,000. So that I'm just getting clarity around that.
Right. Yeah. And when Julie, our grant writer, reached out to KSDE about this grant, they did say that obviously it depends on how many schools apply, and then they probably would go on a per pupil basis on what they allocate. They thought maybe $400,000 to $500,000 for us, and I'm not sure if that was actually the total that they would grant us, and we'd have to match it, or if that was the total of the ask. But we wouldn't have that information unless we actually submitted the application, and they wait and see how many other applications they receive.
I think that's the general process for all grants.
Yeah. So to Dr. Wynn's point, we could add additional SROs and then see if they awarded and award at that time, and with the recommendations from Chief Nicholson, we can navigate it at that. So we could, yes, fill out the SRO portion in addition to that, the camera portion, and then wait and see what we are approved for. Is that what you're requesting, Dr. Wynn, or am I misunderstanding?
I'm suggesting we leverage everything we have the opportunity to. And if we know we're going to at least add one, which we will possibly add more than one, then why wouldn't we include an SRO, an LEO, an XYZ in exchange to a light or a camera, just as a matter of maximizing our opportunities. That's all I'm saying. So I guess the answer is yes.
Other
now,
thoughts?
the amount, I don't know. Tracy, that's what you do all day long and what we pay you for.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We just, when Julie and I met, we didn't know what direction the board would want us to go. But if you guys would like that, we absolutely can add it. And I completely agree. Let's maximize every dollar we might be able to get. And yes, once we decide, looking also at Chief Nicholson's recommendation, we can sure figure the cost. So if you guys give us that direction, we'd be more than glad to add it and submit that before Friday.
Well, Randy, are you looking for an amended motion?
Well, I was gonna ask if there were other board members who, I think I'm hearing what Dr. Wynn's questions are around, if we can maximize that and include that in the grant. It's not currently in there, so just want to see other board members' thoughts around potentially including that in the grant application for the addition of an SRO and giving staff the time to be able to make those changes within the application before submitting. It sounds like there may be some other folks who might be interested in that. I just want to make sure folks.
Mr. Reels, I would be interested in that. I would agree with Dr. Nguyen. Let's do everything we can.
Ms. Russell, Ms. Drew, is your hand up as well to?
Yes, I
Okay.
will be in agreement in doing that with Chief Nicholson presenting the information and adding it in.
Ms. Russell, thank you, Ms. Drew. Ms. Russell?
Yeah, I think I just needed clarity on Chief Nicholson's. So that's adding the the actual person, but we also would then be at a vehicle shortage. So part of this is vehicle and the personnel expense in this grant, or those are two different conversations.
They were both options. So we could, Chief Nicholson on the other document, and I don't actually have it pulled up, we can leverage what he is saying. If it's a combo of cars and additional people, it may be 2 people, 2 cars, put that in there, and then we'll just see what we are approved for based off of that. So what we can do is once he gives that information to Tracy, I will just make sure I send to you, here's what we are submitting, and whatever you would approve today is to move forward with the addition of SROs or SROs and cars. If you want to keep the car completely separated, we can just do SROs. So whatever your amended motion says, that's what we'll go back and add based off of the dollar amount or parameters we can request.
And I just want to be clear, if we add more SROs or LEOs, we also need additional vehicles. Is that what I'm hearing? Because I don't want to separate the two and then it have an adverse reaction, because now we have the people in positions, but we don't have the vehicles to get them to those things. I just want to be clear before we say yes, remove, and just do personnel, those types of things.
I think personnel is most important. We can deal with the vehicles later.
So currently,
but if I understood and I just quickly read what Chief Nicholson was saying, that if we add the personnel, that's cool, but then the personnel don't have the capacity to get to where they need to be at. And I just want to say we'll put it off later, that's cool, but then it becomes urgent when the people are hired and in the positions that we want them to. So then to be able to carry out the grant, we do need the vehicles. And I just want to be very clear that I understand that, but I also know there have been lots of conversation around fleet, but also knowing that personnel and fleet in this matter absolutely sound like they have to go together. So.
Well, help me understand, have we always had a one-to-one vehicle personnel? Whoever knows this answer, I'm not sure.
No, we don't, and we still would not have a one-to-one. The model when it comes to elementary, if you want a more regular basis presence, if we don't add one SRO or LEO to every elementary building, it was more of a patrol model. So you would have to have a few additional vehicles, because there are some officers now that would be maybe patrolling between these 3 elementary. So I'm here at this time, here at that time. So they actually would need a car, versus if I'm only at this location, I drive to work and that's my location. So no, we currently do not. We still would not be in a one-to-one, but unless you were adding 28 additional SROs or LEOs, you really would have, it would be more of a shared model, which would require some additional vehicles. And Chief Nicholson can tell you the total.
So yeah, basically I had 2 different proposals, and without further complicating this, thought we could have additional models as well. However, the one model like Dr. Stubblefield said, that adds an SRO to every single elementary school would not require additional cars. The model where we added a patrol function in there, where one officer would go to multiple elementary schools, does require us to have more vehicles. Right now we have, I think, about 13 or 14 cars, and those are assigned to sergeants, myself, my deputy chief, and then there's 6 or 7 cars that we use that we spread out throughout multiple different schools for a response capability if we have something where we have to have multiple officers at a particular location. So this would kind of further expand that and give us the ability to have fewer officers, but more cars to respond to multiple locations, if that helps clarify any.
Right. Well, I appreciate that, but what I believe is on the table is maximizing a little bit of grant money. And to respond to your initial question, Ms. Russell, my interest and intent was only for personnel, because if you take up $70,000 for a vehicle, you've almost taken a bunch of this grant money out of the whole consideration. And if currently we don't have a 1-to-1, then what we're talking about is one pot of money, that entire, and I'm looking at Chief Nicholson's 3-legged proposal that has 3 different proposals. That's a larger conversation. And that's a larger conversation that comes from, it would appear, 2 or 3 different budgets. For example, the library would be, in my opinion, coming from a library budget. So his entry statement, not to complicate, but yes, to complicate. When you add vehicles, I think it complicates just the grant application. But that was not my initial interest. Personnel. You only have a few dollars to choose from, to work with, I mean.
Ms. Humphreys?
If I understood correctly, when Tracy was talking, the KSDE thinks that the largest grant amount would be around $250,000, with $250,000 being matched by the local district. That's what we're guessing. So,
I'm not sure, Ms. Humphreys. It could be that they would actually award us $400,000 and we would match $400,000. We just don't know for sure. I did just get a message also that vehicles may not be allowed. It does say in the grant application that any costs associated with any newly created school resource officers, but if that kind of helps a little bit, that may be questionable if they would even pay for vehicles.
Okay, my question, I guess, is if we submit a grant for this, say the total cost is $600,000, and we leave the cameras in there, but they only award us the $250,000 with us matching it. How do we prioritize whether we're going to use it on cameras or on SROs? Whereas if we submit this application the way it's written, it's very clear what we're going to spend the money on. We don't have to go back and go, well, we're going to use part of it on this and part of it on that. That's just my question.
Well, you're not asking me, but that's what a board is for, and that's how you deliberate any budget or any dollar. If you get $1, you got to decide how you're spending every penny.
Tracy, do you know, do you have a sense from KSDE whether if they don't, award the entire amount that we request, whether they would allow us to then go back and say, hey, we want to use it in this manner, or will they just instruct us, hey, we're going to give you X amount for this and Y amount for that? Do you have a sense of what they might do?
I do
sorry
not.
To put you on the spot for
no, you're fine. I do not specifically know that in these grants. We've only usually asked for one type of item in the past, but my presumption, and it would just be a presumption, would be that they would say this is amount you're going to get based on the student count and how many other schools applied. And then I think it would come back to the board to make the decision on how to spend those grant funds. I can't guarantee that, but that would be my logical thought.
Thank you. So just to try to help us move along a little bit, and thank you, Ms. Humphries, for the question. I wonder, it sounds like that there is some appetite from the board to want to include, or at least, look at additional SROs. I know that's a larger conversation for us to have, and to really figure out what that might look like, along with Chief and Dr. Stubblefield, to really get a sense of where we might want to go with that. But if there is, it sounds like there's some consensus around the board to look at that option and include it in this grant application, to request funding for an SRO. And just, if there's some really strong pushback against that, I would like to hear that. And I guess maybe it does, again, it falls into a larger conversation. And again, to what Dr. Nguyen said, prioritizing what those budget conversations are going to be. And if it's something that this board does want to do, we can leverage some funds here potentially, but we'll have to find the remaining funds elsewhere. Ms. Russell?
I would just make the argument that at this time, I don't think we have enough information to move forward with SROs in the vehicle. I think we have a new chief that I think I have 1,001 questions for at this time. I understand leveraging dollars and opportunity, but there also is no promise. And so I don't want to put us in a position to have to come back and reprioritize. I'm interested in the number of vacancies of LEOs in school and SROs, and just by increasing personnel, that doesn't actually mean that you get the people in those positions. And so I think just to make this a clean application, my pushback would be just for it to be for those cameras, allowed the chief to have some time to figure out what's best while we're in these budget conversations, and intentionally have him come back and present to us while we're in these budget conversations to address this bigger conversation that needs to be had, and how we proceed further after that.
Well, I disagree, because if you get, just for discussion purposes, you get $100,000, and that is not enough for all your cameras and XYZ, you're going to have to decide where they go. This is just a matter of saying, one personnel, we've already established board position of adding SRO, so that's not even debatable. So including it in an application for personnel only is logical. And so I support it. And I'm prepared to make an amended motion at the appropriate time.
So this is Yolanda. I'm sorry. Maybe I missed something. I agree with Ms. Russell. I thought part of our original conversation was to go back, vet our open PCNs. I mean, just back to her point of we have open positions. How are they going to be used? How are they going to be leveraged versus throwing additional personnel to this? That's where I'm really torn. And then I also understand the grant's been written, but nothing is promised at this point. So we're spending a lot of time here when I really just say, let's call for the vote.
Thank you. I do just one clarifying question for Ms. Kaiser, if you're still with us here. So the cost that you have that's written in the grant, I say you, like the team that's worked on this, the cost that you have for cameras in here, would that fulfill the needs that we have, or are there for the cameras, or is this just partial? I mean, will this get us to where we need to be if we were to receive the amount and able to replace all the cameras that we're requesting?
Yeah, it is my understanding from TIS, and anybody else can jump in from that team, that this would replace all of our outdated cameras and add the cameras to the elementary schools that don't currently have them in the locations that TIS recommended.
Then just go to Tracy.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you. So there is a motion to approve the grant as submitted by staff. There's a motion and a second. Dr. Nguyen, I heard you state that you wanted to make an amendment to the motion. Is that correct?
Sure, why not? So we can have a public vote. I'd like to amend the motion for the safe and secure grant application to include one SRO and the associated costs included in the grant application. After which, then, when we receive it, then the board has the authority to spend appropriately.
Second.
Did Leslie get that?
So is that, and just to be clear, Dr. Nguyen, I'm sorry, just to be clear, are you asking for Ms. Humphreys to amend her motion, her original motion? Is that what you're requesting?
Whoever made the motion is to a substitute motion.
Okay, a substitute motion.
To
Okay.
include in the current safe and secure grant application, one SRO personnel and associated costs, period. Now, the understanding is that when we are awarded X amount, the board then will have to determine how it is spent.
Okay, I was just trying to clarify whether it was substitute.
We need clarity. Yes, we need clarity.
So there's a substitute motion on the floor to add an additional SRO personnel to the written grant application. Is there a second?
Let me correct that. Add a SRO, because there's not SRO in there. So it's not additional.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying. So to add an SRO to the grant application that's currently written, along with the request for cameras and everything else that's in there. There's a second by Ms. Page, I heard. Okay.
Yes.
So which motion are we voting on? The first
The
motion?
substitute motion.
So we'll vote on the substitute motion first. And if that passes, then that's what would then go forward. If it does not, then we would go to the original motion that was made.
Okay.
Unless I'm not correct, and I think we have Terry covering for Mr. Goheen. So if that is not correct, Terry, please correct me.
So my question to the motion is, and probably at Tracy. Tracy, is the grant able to supplement? So say we get the grant, we have an SRO position, the grant we get the full grant and there's one SRO, there's a position open. Are those dollars eligible to substitute, or this grant specifies that it must be adding? I want that clarity, because I guess I could be on board if it allows us to take away and add, but if we're adding to something that we're already short, I'm not sure that I understand that piece.
Yeah, Ms. Russell, the application specifically says for newly created positions of school resource officers. Okay. So we would have that, we'd have to add a new position if that is the direction.
Okay, which also means we have to grow the budget for that position at the close of this grant opportunity.
That would be correct if you want to continue.
Even
that
if
position.
We still have vacancies in our already. Okay.
Thank you. Let me ask Chief Nicholson, do we have all positions filled now?
So we honestly, I don't know how many budgeted positions we have. What I can tell you is that we have 48 staff members currently as we speak total. And I don't know exactly how many SRO positions we were funded for. So we currently have, by my numbers, we currently have 22 SROs within, we have 22 people at this point. The other are additional administrative staff.
Okay.
And
Dr. Stubblefield, when the board took action to, for lack of a better word, direct you and Chief Horn to add,
they were added and put in that budget. I don't know how many openings they currently have. When we had the gap between Chief Horn and Chief Nicholson, we did hire a few. I don't know if we filled all of the positions. So there may be still some open. There are probably more than likely some open positions.
Okay.
But we did put that into the budget, the additional ones that the board approved back in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question for me to you, Ms. Russell, is that, and this, of course, you never know until it happens. How do you define add? Because.
Well, Stan Marie, do you happen to know off the top of, and I want to try and get us to a vote. Do you know by chance? I'm looking at the vacancy report and I maybe see some errors, and I just wondered if you knew off the top of your head or at your desk how many SRO position. I didn't want to say, oh, I see that we have this, and maybe that's different.
I don't have that information right
Okay.
now. I can get that to you. I'm actually trying to find it right now.
We have openings because when I kind of stepped in, there were like 4 people in the academy, but we had or 3 people in the academy, but we had like 6 positions. And I'm just saying I may be off. And then so we have openings with the new budgeted, but there were people in the line. We were never fully staffed this year, of the places that were added. So the goal was before the start of next school year, to fully staff all of the positions that we were allotted. So there are openings. I don't know exactly how many openings. And as the board goes through prioritizing budgets, whether we get it or not, if this is a priority, it doesn't necessarily mean growing the budget. It may be doing something instead of, but that's a more nuanced conversation that the board can have around budget priorities at that time. So I just wanted to put that in perspective as well, because it could, those larger conversations around board, budget priorities and things like we have to do what we have to do for the budget here. But I think the board was in agreement. We were going to start in August with regular meetings and the priorities, because there are some other areas that, as was pointed out in the last board meeting, that have been funded by either ESSER or grant dollars that we need to, as administration, make recommendations about. Here's how it's cost neutral, and then the board can decide, and or the ones that we know that individuals have been told that when this runs out, this position ends unless it is determined that it's needed or needs to be added to the budget. And then we would have to figure out how to do it either in a cost neutral way or increase the budget, to your point, Ms. Russell. But all of those things are true and will have to be addressed either way.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move forward with the vote. So again, substitute motion and seconded. That is what's being voted on first, just for clarity, is to add an SRO to the application that is currently presented. So Ms. Smith, would you please do a roll call vote on the substitute motion?
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, no, and not because I don't think that it's important. I believe that once the process has been vetted, we know exactly what we have. We can come back to the table and talk about what's needed. So I don't necessarily believe the budget will have to grow to get this added, or it needs to be added to the grant. Thank you.
Maxine Drew.
Mr. You were muted. I'm sorry. We couldn't hear you.
Maxine Drew, no.
Janie Humphreys.
Janie Humphreys, no.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, no.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
Okay, so the substitute motion does not proceed forward. Okay, so there is an original motion on the table to accept, to approve the grant as submitted. So Ms. Smith, will you please proceed with a roll call on the original motion?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie Humphries, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, no.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Out the win, no, because we're missing an opportunity. And this is a responsibility of the board that we will meet day in and day out, and we are missing opportunities. But when it comes to ESSER funds, you didn't have any question. So grant opportunities, I told you about this month ago. So it should not have come as a last minute application. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. And so thank you, Tracy and staff, Dr. Stubblefield. So if there's anything else, any other questions as you put together the grant and submit the grant, please send that out to the board or board members. If you have additional questions once the grant is, as the grant is being submitted, please follow up and send those to Dr. Stubblefield. Thank you. Next on our agenda is a continuation of our budget conversation. Board, again, we received, this is just, again, an ongoing to our budget conversation. We've received several materials and links to budget information, and so we will continue on. I know we had went through some of the needs assessments at a previous meeting, and I think today we will continue on with that path and answer any questions that we have with our budget. So I will open it up, and Dr. Stubblefield, if you want to continue to lead us through these conversations.
Yes. So my plan was just, we left off on Grant Elementary, and I can share my screen so that we're all looking at the same information. I did share with you all the requirements going into effect July 1st. And I think if the board wants to do something different, just let me know. Once we get through all of the schools and address the questions, then we can talk about I think it's 3 or 4 questions that the board has to address and answer in a total package. I mean, like once we have all the information, and then our plan is to, once it's approved, to post the needs assessments on the individual school website and on our main website, just have directions of this is where you can find it, because those are the requirements. I don't think I'm forgetting any. So do you all just want to start with Grant Elementary as we were moving through those items similar to the last board meeting?
Yes, thank you.
I will share my screen.
And Dr. Stubblefield, could you resend that KSDE document? I can't seem to find it in your Friday updates, and I believe it's probably pretty important for us to have it easy access as we're going through the needs assessments.
Yes, I can resend it. Dawn is not on the architect. Actually, I know Tracy or Lisa, if you have it readily available, I can't see anyone anymore because I'm sharing. If one of you all can send that, Lisa Walker will send it so that you all have it. I will say the template that they shared was based off of actually our template, because we based it off their original one. But those questions around the barriers, and Dr. Nguyen, you may know better than me because you voted on it. Is it for the entire district or by school that they have to answer each one of those questions? Like, do we answer it one every time for every building, or do we answer it? Because I thought, and I could be wrong, my understanding was we talk about it as a system, but I could have misunderstood.
I think I shared with you, and again, the language will be clear when you look at it. It says each attendance center, and each attendance center is a school. Mm-hmm. And remember, we had talked about that if one school is 100% ELA, perhaps language is a barrier. At another school, there maybe is only 2% ELA. Language could still be a barrier, but it may not be as outstanding of a barrier. So the discussion was each attendance center.
Okay. So I will also share this. Principals, we meet with them on Thursday. So they have not seen this, or we've not discussed it with them, so they can go back and from the information. A lot of the information around the barriers, if you and I can show you Grant's needs assessment. When you look at some of these questions, you can pull it like, here's what our challenges are, but they can go, we'll have them go back and answer those questions like barriers and things, so that the board will be aware of what they are perceiving as barriers, since they're doing that, but we don't see them until Thursday. So I don't have what, like, them explicitly answering those questions today.
And understandably, that's why perhaps it was misunderstood that when we started, and my intent of providing the summary language was to give us a leg up, but that nevertheless, here we are. And even when you gave us that list of, I'll call them interventions that you said the district provides, I believe you also said they're not provided at each and every school. Is that correct?
Those are at every school. The list that we get is at every school. Okay. What I said was, when you get, that's like tier 1 every school. Okay. The tier 1 interventions, the tier 2 and 3, there are some consistencies across the schools, but it really is dependent on the individual needs of the students. And that's where buildings may look different. But tier 1,
and that's where that column could go. If it says grant, once you establish, your principal establishes the barrier, then that team would also probably in another column say, based on those interventions, what they believe will be the tools that would, and you can't say guarantee, so that's not the proper word, but facilitate those students moving into proficiency. And I think that's what you said, that's about all you can do.
Correct.
But so what must be done.
Right. And so based off of that, although it's how we talked about it, that's what's on this, where you see like what was approved or whatever. Those are the requests that came from principals to address what they saw, to get the students to improvement. So that's where the staffing or other things, this is primary staffing, but that's where those requests came from based off of their student data and how their students were performing.
And those staffing needs are budgeted, correct?
These are budgeted. It's either been approved to title for title or ESSER dollars. So in the context,
there's no distinction. There's no distinction as far as that you must identify where the dollars come from, the source of the dollars.
Right.
All we know is that they then are, those resources are allocated, mm-hmm. and this is where the sticky wick gets. How do you measure the performance or the interventions to then verify or to circle back around at mid-semester are assessments improving or things like that. That also is where that internal discussion must take place. Because you just can't put it down and say it's going to happen. Because it doesn't work like that.
Correct. And so at the June, I believe, 28th board meeting, Dr. Campbell and her team, when they give the final update around the academic and data stuff, she will talk about what we will have in place for quarterly updates around what assessments we're using, what data we're collecting, based off of all of these things. And at a future board meeting, I believe the June 14th board meeting, there is, as a part of the frontline suite, which we have frontline, there's a student analytics that we can pull all of the data so that we can provide that information around all of these things to the board on a quarterly basis. But that's what we're putting in place for next year, is not currently in place.
So as a generic question, Dr. Stubblefield, I don't know if the board understands, but do you understand what the legislation requires of each district, each board to do?
Yeah.
I mean, you understand better now?
Yes. Yes, I understand.
Now, the question again continues, how do we document it? Does that template provide a way to document as well?
Document the progress? The template that
document the fact that we have allocated resources in view of the barriers XYZ to get to proficiency.
The template, the grants, this
the template that you just got from KSDE.
So theirs is very similar to this, but I think, which I don't have it in front of me, we would just have to have a column to say allocate or change the word. Like when it says rationale, this is what I need. Where it says guidance notes here, we could say it's out. This is what was allocated, and this is how we'll look at it on a quarterly or semester basis. We can change that there, but so then that will be a document that's on each school's website, and then we can document it by having either semester or quarterly reports that's documented in our board minutes to show that we have are looking at the progress.
Because for board purpose, and I've said this before, and I don't know if it goes in one ear out the other, but these needs assessments are then used as examples of of why KCK is either complying with the law or not. And I shared that with Dr. Stubblefield during the special committee during the summer. And then they doubled down and submitted copies of KCK's high school needs assessment forms in the regular committee meeting. So I don't know what it takes for board members to understand that not only is there a target on our back, but we're under the microscope. And so if the law says XYZ and we choose not to abide by, then we're set up for ridicule any way we go. But then you give them fuel to ridicule us. And that is just unacceptable in my opinion. And I don't think you would want that as a board member. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Stubblefield?
Yeah,
You were there.
There are districts that are under the microscope more so than others. I do think the process that we have in place and documenting it and having a way to regularly monitoring it will allow us, but it also allow us to make data-informed decisions around how we're investing and how we're intervening appropriately to see the progress. So with that, I think by at least the board, starting with the board knowing and understanding what each school is asking for, then we'll work with the principals to come back with the identifying the barriers and putting that in that format so that and it's similar, we can do it just like we've done this, is to have each school have the question, have the principals answer it in one location for the board so the board can approve it, but then they each will have it, whatever needs to be publicly published on the website. But I think going through this, so then you'll know what they've asked for. And then when they do the second part of just clearly saying what the barriers are, although they're in the needs assessment, it'll just be a way for the board to have reference if things come up.
Well, for example, Dr. Stubblefield, looking at what they have right here, what would be a barrier for at Grant? We already know their scores are, what are their scores? I don't want to misquote. What are their assessment scores?
Grant scores, I can go to that folder.
Oh, I thought you were there. I'm sorry.
No, well, some of them, the way I can scroll back up here.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
So 88%, 97% are not at proficiency.
Mm-hmm.
That's a math.
And then ELA is right up above it, 76 and 93. So then they have their goal there. And then, so these are what their barriers that they just need to say in a different way and explicitly identifying them. And then this is where what they're saying they need here, which is what transfers over to this one pager, because it was mainly around staffing for what is needed. So Grant, based off of all of that, has asked for a recovery room monitor for 100% of the time, a classroom teacher to reduce the number of kids in the kindergarten classroom. And then they were eliminating instructional aid to get a parent liaison. And then they weren't able to fill the reading interventionist position last year, but I think they're trying. So these are the things that they are saying that will help them to overcome the barriers, which is what, and Lisa Walker, if I'm misspeaking, because you all were, or Tracy or whomever was in the meetings, if I'm misspeaking, you can clarify, but that's what they're saying they need staffing wise to move forward. The document that I provided on last Tuesday around here are the curriculum things that we've put in place for all of our schools. That's why you don't see curriculum or special programs like that on there. And then like our CSI schools, which Grant is one of them, they have the in-person tutoring. So all of those kind of things are already in place. This is what they're asking for budget be allocated, or that's what they're wanting in addition to what all of the schools have in place.
And help me remember what virtual math program are we going to use?
Is Darcy on or Matt? We have, Yeah, can you talk about our math intervention?
So currently, we use the Eureka math for our core programming, and with that comes a program called InSync, which is it is an online resource that we can use for intervention. However, our goal for this upcoming school year is to continue to build a protocol of intervention for mathematics. One of the approaches we're taking is to do some piloting this fall with some in-person and online intervention for students. We currently have that we'll be bringing to the board in, I think it's July, because we do have some allocation of SR2 funds that we would like to use for some reading intervention that will be on top of our core CKLA. And Allie's cadres have worked to narrow that down to a phonemic awareness product and a phonics product that we could use on top of kind of a tier 2 and tier 3 approach for students who are not, maybe the core isn't meeting their needs. But since we have this new core program, a lot of our focus is going to be on making sure that there is a solid launch and implementation K3 for CKLA and then Frog Street at early childhood. So while we are really focusing on getting that implementation strong, we're building a protocol of interventions along with Matt's support as the director of MTSS to really look at if a student is scoring this on FastBridge, here is something that we could try to close those gaps for students, particularly if it's foundational reading and math.
Does that meet the requirements in the new legislation about a virtual math program?
Yes, we're taking consideration of the virtual math piece, and I'm also taking consideration on the Every Child Can Read, because we have very specific things that we have to look at for the reading and the literacy pieces for that piece of legislation. So we're making sure that we're checking all of our boxes on those.
Because you mentioned elementary, did you mention high school?
Mm-hmm. So currently, middle school and high school, they have core programming that comes with online resources for tiered supports. We have not piloted any resource for reading or math that would be like a tier 2 or tier 3 support, because both my perspectives and big ideas come with tiered intervention as part of the core program. And with that, there are online components to that tiered intervention.
And they have been approved by KSDE?
Yes, they're on the approved KSDE list and also vetted through the What Works Clearinghouse.
Nope,
and
thank
Ed
you.
Reports. Mm-hmm.
So are there any additional questions about grant? I don't want to do that. Now I will go to Hazel Grove. And Hazel Grove, those are their requests if you want, and I can go to, so you can see their performance. Let me go back up. These used to be in alphabetical order, but principals have been in updating them, so they got a little.
You just passed Hazel Grove. It's the last column. Scroll up right there.
So those are their results from 2021. And down here, when you look at staff needs, they weren't asking specifically for staff there, but over here in this one, after conversations with staff here, they're asking for 3 instructional aides and a recovery room monitor and an intervention teacher. Any questions for Hazel Grove? Not. I will go to JFK. This is JFK's current assessments. And their staff needs was based on the deficiencies in ELA and math. 2 intervention teachers that are needed. When they had the conversation, they were getting an instructional aide, a recovery room monitor, 2 intervention teachers, a tech teacher for special assistance for large buildings paid by district out of ESSER general funds.
Dr. Stubblefield, help me remember, are intervention teachers specialized in the discipline or they are gen ed?
They typically, and Lisa, you can chime in, but they typically, sometimes they just get a general, but they provide specific support either in math or reading. Sometimes they'll have, if they have multiple ones, they'll have one for math, one for reading, or they may do it by grade level bands like K2 and then 3-5, and they do both. I think it just depends on their configuration. Lisa, did I misspeak?
No, you're correct. We've kind of moved away from specialized certifications because it's difficult to find people to fill those positions. So we've been using certified teachers, and then the BLTs and the principal identify the content area where the support will be provided.
And what does BLT stand for?
Building Leadership Team.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
It's past lunchtime.
So, Dr. Stubblefield, I do have one question. With the recovery rooms and the monitors, understanding the positions being built in, one thing that I think we've heard a lot is, so if I go one step lower, it's around like support and just making sure that they have resources as well. So understanding those positions are being asked for, but with those positions, do we have the right support systems and the right the right resources available to those people once we get them there? Because I noticed that we have quite a few of those requests as well. I'm not sure of the turnover and why it's happening.
Well, we changed, the recovery room used to be ISS.
Yeah.
And we're changing that more to a restorative space so that students, whatever it may be that would have gotten them an ISS, that they are more focused on how to repair the relationship and move forward so they can be back in class and not miss an instruction for punishment. So all of those individuals will be trained in restorative practices, and we'll have ongoing professional development around that. So the goal will be to, and you have to remember ISS and OSS is very different. Like if you are doing something that like a weapon or fighting or those kind of things, that's OSS. The ISS stuff typically is things that if they can make it right, they can be back in so that they're not missing the core instruction. So that's the shift to more recovery versus punishment, is really trying to correct the behavior, teach the students replacement behavior, work through the situation. And there'll be, the restorative model, as well as like making sure that our SEL curriculum and those kind of things where we need to lean in to get the student back in class sooner than later. It does not mean that students won't be held accountable, but our data, which, historically we have gotten reprimanded by KSDE for the over suspension of students. We're just trying to bring all of this back in balance, but not make people feel like we are not holding students accountable.
Okay. So I think my follow-up question, and budget related, not budget related, but just like the what's next step. So understanding that that position is there, but just making sure that we also have with those positions, because there's quite a few, like there's clear protocol and our teams feel supported. So in the budget season as well, making sure that we have those resources, what's needed is outlined when you escalate to your principal, what can be said, because there's been some inconsistencies, I think, across the board with some of those things. So that's where my kind of like what's next question comes with these being approved.
Yeah. So as you're aware, there's lots of transitions. You did approve the new code of conduct.
Yeah.
Few board meetings ago. That has not been shared widely in the sense that principals were wrapping up. As we close out the year with principals and as we bring principals back, we are discussing with them how this information needs to be shared with their staff members and others, and then how we will work with Edwin and his team as well to make sure that we are just communicating, like if a parent was looking on the website, what are our practices and protocols and that kind of thing. So those are things that are still in process that we will have in place before the start of the school year.
Okay. And I'm sure you're looking at what the budget will look like to make sure those things are effectively communicated, outlined appropriately. You're consistent across your schools with your staff and as you're going through that turnover and that transition. Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Stubblefield.
Yes.
We're not going to call it ISS. So when will these restorative individuals who are going to be that restorative teacher to help kids, when will they be trained?
So all of our high school staffs will be trained in August, and those recovery room monitors, they're not certified teachers, they're recovery room monitors. They'll be a part of those. We that's a part of the August onboarding for all high school staff. We're starting with high school, and then those individuals that are recovery room monitors.
So the middle school when will they be trained? You said August high school.
So middle school, there are a couple. So Carby, Bruce, and I don't have it in front of me. And I think one other middle school will be with the high schools, but the trainers only have so much capacity. Okay. So honestly, their entire staff won't be trained until next year, or there may be some that we can do one-offs on. But because we want to ensure that all of the staff is trained, we are targeting high schools first, and then we'll do middle schools. There are some elementaries that are doing that because the training is like a 6-hour training. And then the recovery room monitors and those, they'll have ongoing training throughout the year, but our partners who do it, they only have so much capacity. So we just have to phase it in over the next couple of years.
And then what about our parents? Will there be any special training or at least informationals for them
so
to make sure that they understand that we move away from the punitive to something a little different?
So Dr. Australia, and as we bring on the Welcome Center and working with Dr. Australia and his team who have been in charge of the restorative, we will have more parent nights, parent information, specific ones for the high schools, but we are flushing out all of those plans and what that can look like and to provide the information to the parents in the community.
Thank you.
So are you the opinion the restorative justice could contribute to increasing levels of proficiency?
Yeah, I mean, there's research around that if students are connected in class and not missing because they're out of school, and that whole problem solving and fixing transfers over to them being more engaged in schools because they have better relationships with staff. So next up is John Fisk, and their data. Let me go up. That's their data, and then their request is an instructional aid, a recovery room monitor, and intervention teachers. And that was JFK, I'm sorry. An ESLA, a translator, a class size reduction teacher, and 2 instructional aids for literacy. And that was based off their data.
So they too are about 90% non-proficient. I mean, 141 out of, was 147 out of 191? No, 298. So.
Yeah.
So they're all about 90, 95%.
Yeah, and then Lindbergh, I think, is very similar. I mean, percentage-wise. $94 and $86. And they are requesting an intervention teacher, a class size reduction teacher, and an instructional aid. Lowell, Bruni, their numbers may be. Sorry. Lowell Bruni is at 70% of their students. Sorry. Oh, that's their goal. Theirs is more like how many students do not meet proficient is 260 out of 419 and 220. And they are requesting an instructional aid and a class size reduction teacher at first and second grade. Emmy Pearson, they have 597 students and 78 and 79%. 84 and 90 is what they have there. And they are requesting 2 class size reduction teachers, 2 intervention teachers, an instructional coach, a tech, and that was all of their requests. Mark Twain. Mark Twain was at 73% at level 2 and 84% at level 2, and they broke theirs down by level 1 and 2, and they are requesting an ESL aide, intervention teacher, and an instructional aide.
So at what point will you know these positions have been filled and what remains? And what then remains as a vacancy?
These positions, like they're currently advertised, and so we are all like working to fill them all. They'll be advertised until they're filled. We're trying to fill them as quickly as possible. SAMRE some of them, a lot of them are filled. If you look at the vacancy report for elementary, it'll show what is currently open. SAMRE, do you have the information offhand if you're on here?
And as she's getting ready, the real question is, how do you, or when do you, let's say, this is June, so July 15th, do you go to this principal? Where were we?
We were at Mark Mckinley.
Okay, let's go Mark. It doesn't matter, Mckinley. At what point do you say, in view of we're still trying to identify barriers and what it's going to take, and I know you do this, I just want to know what's the process. At what point do you say, okay, we do have your intervention teacher, we do have your third grade teacher, we don't have this teacher, we don't have that teacher. So how do you compensate for that vacancy that you don't have, knowing you must move these kids to proficiency?
That's where we would then try to use some contracted services or find long-term subs who are retired teachers and that kind of thing. Like that's when we would move to that phase. Ms. Drew, did you have a question?
Yes. What I wanted to know is, how have the principals begun to look at AVID as well as proximity learning?
So AVID, we are starting at all of the high schools and a couple of middle schools. And again, that's about capacity and training. Because the elementary, we introduced this letters, which is the science of reading. AVID will be introduced at those levels, except for some that were exploring doing some Kagan structures. Okay. That will come on once that, because the letters training takes about 2 full years. And Darcy, if you can chime in if I'm wrong. So once they're through that, we will be ready to introduce AVID like at the elementary level. But they are, it's like a 3 to 4 year plan that we're going to roll it out so we can do good fidelity. And then we did not look at proximity learning for elementary just because we really, at that level, although they do it, we really are hopeful that we'll be able to fill all of the elementary positions or do some more in-person structures, just because of the nature of elementary is what we were thinking around that.
Okay, thank you.
So then we have McKinley, which they asked for a class size reduction and an intervention teacher as well. Unless you want me to go back to the needs assessment, because I know you all have access to it, I'll just go down the line of what they're asking for, but it's up to you. I don't have any issue going back and forth. New Chelsea, other than this is not there it is. New Chelsea has 574 students, and 90% of their students do not meet in ELA and 95 in math. and they were asking for a parent liaison, a recovery room monitor, an intervention teacher, a ESL teacher, a tech teacher around for specials so that their teachers can have common plan time. Anytime for the large schools that you see an additional specials teacher is so that the grade level teachers can have a common plan time so that they can plan and collaborate and problem solve together.
So Dr. Stubblefield, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to come across as if staff is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I just want to be careful with that. Even with these asks to staff, so we're putting people to a process. Like, who is spending time with them to make sure of like what this should look like? How do they really move the needle? Yes, we helped you fill these positions, but we really want to be able to see this type of traction based off of these positions. Like, how is that conversation happening? Because I'm all for putting people to the process, but where is the conversation around expectations here?
So that's when I was talking about us adding the student analytics component to Frontline to pull the data. So if it's a title teacher or an ESL teacher, it's that professional development and us as we look at our guaranteed viable curriculum of what we're looking at and measuring and those kind of things, and the training that we are providing as we onboard them. And then on the Wednesday PDs and the other days, that's when all of that happens. And the support that the training and guidance that we provide to principals around what data we're collecting with the DigiCoach walkthrough. Those are all the ways that we are systematizing it to collect consistent data to look at. And we also heavily rely on our built-in instructional coaches to go in and model for different teachers who may or may not, when we are at the point where we can look at specific data, or when teachers are asking for, like, I know we got training on this, I'm not necessarily comfortable in implementing it, or what does a model lesson look like, or can you help me? So those are the things that we are systematizing. We do have instructional coaches, at least one in all of our buildings. Some of our secondaries and I think larger elementaries may have more than one, and they may support at different grade levels, but that's how we will ensure.
And Dr. Stubblefield, I can add to that as well. For our any math or reading interventionists that a building might want to add, we have a plan through curriculum and instruction, and also Matt Anderson as the director of MTSS. We've reframed a couple of my current CNI positions to be tiered instructional coaches that can then pull these cadres of reading or math interventionists for very targeted professional development around FastBridge, how to use the FastBridge data to make instructional decisions, and then which materials through our reading and math protocols that we're building would be the best intervention match based on student deficit. So if students are needing specific work and a specific skill, we are going to really work with these intervention teachers from our seat to help them understand how to do that intervention match, how to determine the intensity of the intervention, how to determine group size for the intervention, how to create fluid groups in an MTSS framework. And so that's really the work that Matt and I are engaging my team and also these instructional coaches that Dr. Stubblefield's talking about. We're really going to have some targeted work with them next year in making sure that they are supporting the data conversations at the building level and really working the framework of the multi-tiered system of support that we have been partnering with TASN around.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that explanation. And I get you, a lot of times we're looking at it from a bigger scale. So then I think my follow-up question would be, and you probably have a plan in place for this, is like, how are we documenting as you go along? Because we've been having these types of conversations for a very long time. And so it's just like, how do you really, really transition into being able to see some things? So again, yeah. I appreciate the positions, but positions don't mean anything without the work. So I'm not saying anything that we know.
Yeah, and in terms of documentation, and this kind of answers, I think, what Dr. Nguyen was talking about earlier as well. You know, we talk about using our FastBridge data as kind of that dipstick measurement of is what we're doing working, but we're also going to be investing in some diagnostics that will accompany FastBridge. So FastBridge tells you that there's a fire in the house, and we need some diagnostics in place to say, okay, here's the room the fire's in, and here's how we're going to put the fire out. And then with those diagnostics, we're going to be able to track data through progress monitoring. And that progress monitoring is also built into FastBridge. So we'll have our benchmark data, we'll have progress monitoring data, we'll have diagnostic data that hopefully a SIT team, you know, if a student's going to the student intervention team for discussion, for potential other resources, that data will be available. And we're also hoping to work with our new DERA executive director to really think about how to streamline the data that we're getting in FastBridge with the data that we're capturing in Infinite Campus, and making sure that those systems talk to one another so that we have true learner profiles for the students that we're servicing, so that we can really see the academic and the social emotional all in one place, so that we can really build this plan for how to close gaps for individual students.
And that's, Yolanda, where the student analytics, the front, it'll pull it so that it's not a manual process where you may get more errors. And then it also will, eventually, we will be able to look at the ROI, like we would be able to potentially pull for a specific, like all of our interventionists, and say, okay, kids who see interventionists, have they made movement? And if then we would be able to make informed decisions around maybe this model is working great, and so we need to invest more in that, or we've been doing this for 2-3 years and we see no movement, we need to do something differently. But that's where the importance of that data and looking at that, so you can look at your return on investment based off of either positions or curriculum and or whatever the initiative may be, because you can tie the students directly to whatever it is or however you're intervening.
Okay.
And then if we see like a particular school that's making a lot of movement as well, we can see what they're doing that another school doing, or what are those variables that may not be doing that. But that'll just allow us to be able to look at it more so in real time without it being a manual process for a person.
Okay, thank you both.
So New Stanley asked for 2 class size reduction teachers. I can pull their building needs assessment up really fast. There it is. New Stanley had 84% score at level 1 at levels 1 and 2, and 91 at levels 1 and 2 in ELA and math. And I will say what's not necessarily on here, which would be a tier 2. If you recall, New Stanley Summer School, we're introducing the dual language program. And we also, and I don't know if Jackie's on here, but with K-State, I believe it's with K-State, there'll be a couple of more schools that will get professional development and the training around dual language programming, where we have a high percentage of where students where English is their second language, and the research around that and the movement around that is pretty powerful when you see how those students progress when you teach in a dual language model. So that is something that will be more like a tier 2, because all of our schools will not be that. Get that.
Did we approve it later than the principal knew to add? Is that what happened?
Knew to add what?
You said it's not on there, that the dual language.
Well, I'm saying it's not on this document because is
It doesn't ask for it, right?
Right. And it's not necessarily staffing. It may be already built into his staffing. Is more around the training and some of that. So it may just mean us hiring a Spanish speaking third grade teacher that's already like, and we already have this many third grade teachers.
So that's something that will go into this JKLM column. That doesn't exist. I mean, the column we're going to close
like
this
what,
week. Okay.
Yeah. So the schools that are starting that process, I don't know the timeline off the top of my, they submitted the grant, but we did introduce it at summer school. We did start to roll out, like to get some information at New Stanley for summer school for sure. And then once we get the information back from the grant, because the grant does not require matching dollars, the information that K-State, I think it was K-State, I hope I'm not misspeaking. Once we have that, then we can bring it to the board of what it looks like, but it wouldn't, it's not gonna, that the grant part doesn't cost the district anything.
No, but that's the type of barrier you would suggest perhaps is at New Stanley that could contribute to the 90% lack of proficiency. And then that is the potential resolution or resource allocation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Then Noble Prentice is 130 out of 243 and 152 out of 243. And they are requesting an instructional aide, an intervention teacher, and push in Quindaro.
Okay, help me understand again, Dr. Stubblefield. What does an instructional aide do?
It's like a para, but for general ed students. They're like an adult in the classroom that will provide additional instructional support. Or so if I'm a teacher and I have 17 kids in there, they can help me with small group and that kind of thing. It's not a teacher. It's like a para, but it's for general ed versus special ed students.
Okay, because it seems like everyone's asking for instructional aides.
Yeah, it's like a para, but they can be used for any student groups or that kind of thing. Quindaro asked for 2 intervention. I just talked about Quindaro. Silver City asked for a recovery room monitor, a parent liaison, and then just for their attendance secretary to translate 50% out of title and the other 50% out of general. So they were just asking for attendance secretary that can help with translation.
Dr. Stubblefield, does your status as a teacher, if you're ESL endorsed, still determine whether you get that para or not?
For an ESL para?
No, well, not for an ESL para. Let's say you're a regular teacher, and when I was teaching, I took the classes, but I didn't get the certification in ESL endorsement. So they allowed me to get a para, but anyone else who had the ESL endorsement, they couldn't get a para. Does that still stand today?
I don't know anything about that staffing, and I don't think Jackie's on here, but I can ask.
Okay, I appreciate that. I didn't know if they still did that.
Yeah, I'm not certain at all. I've not heard that, so I don't want to say yes or no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Stony Point.
Could you explain how a parent liaison contributes to student achievement?
So the ones who have asked for parent liaisons, it's really around communicating directly with the families to make sure that whatever may maybe contributing to the barriers that to help the parents to navigate the school system or to get the proper support so that we can make sure the students have like whatever they need, within school or outside of school or whatever services we can provide as a district. Is just engaging the parents around those sorts of things and making sure for whatever resources we can provide to the family or direct them so that they can be whatever support they need for the students so they can be successful.
Okay, so since we maybe have not been super clear about acknowledging the barriers, and this is something that we will move toward, will the principals and the parent liaisons understand now that they may have an additional job to do? Do you understand my question?
An additional job as far as the
barriers.
I think honestly, they have always been doing that. It's just not been clearly written down somewhere. Like if I go to the principal or a parent liaison now, they could probably rattle off several barriers. They just have never had to formalize it and put it here. So I don't think the additional step would be formalizing and putting it there. But in all of our conversations, the work that they do around root cause analysis and looking at what's happening for it, that's just honestly what they've been doing all along. It just
right. And I understand that. But since we are now almost formalizing more things that they are doing, all need to do it, I guess, know that they're supposed to do it at all schools. That's my statement as far as everybody does what they need to do. We understand that. But there seems to there is a more coordinated push for them to do certain things. And that's what I'm just saying. I think everyone needs to know clearer what they need to do so that the desired outcomes are what's going to happen, instead of assuming that that's what they know to do and they do it anyway. But again, if you're going to ask somebody to document it in January and they didn't know that they had to give you the exact date and how many parents attended, then it's not fair to them. That's all I'm just suggesting.
Yeah. So what we'll do with principals and for ourselves, I mean, they keep a lot of that data. And Lisa, if I'm misspeaking, you can, in their school improvement plans, that they document all of the meetings and who's attending. They have that data now. So it's just a matter of them, for whatever documented form that we create, just transferring it over to that. And that's what we'll try to make it as simple as possible. But all of them keep all of their data and their building improvement plans with all of their meetings with parents and who they contacted in is it called the CanStar, Lisa? Okay.
Yes, it's with their school improvement plan, Kansas Star.
Okay. And some of them have had parent liaisons. Some schools have had them for years. Some people are adding them. Some are increasing the amount of time. But a lot of what we're formalizing, because it's being paid for out of federal dollars, has always been required around the data, and that part is just transferring it to what the legislators are now requiring. So I see we have 10 minutes. So we have Stony Point North, South, Stony Point South, TA Edison, Wellborn, West Park, and Whittier. Similar to the other schools, they all have asked for either instructional aids, class size reduction, and those things. So there's not anything that is necessarily different for the last schools, because the time boundary, I will, since you all have access it, is there anyone that you want to look at in particular, or do you want to go through each of them individually? Or you want to wrap up elementary, and then when we meet next week, we'll move to middle?
Can we real quickly just see their proficiency rate?
Mm-hmm. So Stony Point South is 70% did not meet for ELA and 88% for math. That's South. Stony Point North. Did we? I went out of alphabetical order. Stony Point North. They listed, the link is provided, how many students are not. So they put theirs in a link. I think when you look at the inverse, I'm sorry, I could open that, but wait a minute. They show the numbers that were actually proficient here, reading through 18%. Well, no, that's not. Stony Point North, they listed there, which is what we are going to ask all of them to do, so it doesn't have identifiable data. They listed they attached their building accountability report, and it shows you like their post-secondary effectiveness, and then here are their test scores there. So their performance is similar to the other. Oh, what was the next one? TA Edison. TA Edison has 77.8 and 76, and that's ELA and math. Wellborn, Westport, Whittier. Wellborn. $245 out of 546, and then 267. So they're not in the 90%. I mean, they are a little better than some of the others.
West Park is next.
Okay. West Park, 529 students. Third grade, 80 students not meeting proficiency. In fourth grade, 73 students not meeting proficiency equals 73. So 80 and 73%. So they're between 80, and then Wellborn is Whittier. Who is Whittier? Is that the one we haven't looked at? Whittier is 216 and 231. And so they did theirs in a spreadsheet, but what guidance we'll give them is to attach their building report cards, because then it's not necessarily a spreadsheet that could potentially have identifiable information on it. So that's all of the elementaries. We'll meet with principals on Thursday, and probably in one of the July meetings, we'll have each school in one document, the barriers, what they're going to do. Like some of this will just be transferring or adding a column. And then when we meet next week, we can look at the middle. We can start middle schools and then high schools.
You meet with all principals, you say, or just elementary principals?
We meet with all principals on Thursday. Yeah. So they all will get the information. We're breaking them up into two. I'll stop sharing. We're breaking them up into secondary and elementary. So they'll all get the same information, but we'll work because they have middle school principals requests and the high school principal requests are a little different than the elementary. So we'll talk through that with them.
And you'll inform them of the new requirements on all of those points.
Yeah, we'll share all of the documents we shared with you all. We will share with them.
And it seems like instructional aids and class reduction sizes are the two priorities of most of them.
For the elementary?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield, for going through that. Thanks, board, for the questions. If there are additional, please send those along. I know we're running up on time for today, but we will continue this conversation next week. We do have a regular board meeting on next Tuesday, the 13th?
14th. We have a budget meeting on Monday the 13th and a regular meeting on the 13th.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So board, hopefully you have that on your calendar for the 13th, the budget meeting, and then the 14th, the regular board meeting. So if you have any additional questions, again, please send those along prior to so that we can be prepared to discuss and look at any information that's necessary for the budget meeting on the 13th. Anything else from you, Dr. Stubblefield, before we go?
No, not at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield.
Thank you. Thanks to you and the team. Thank you, board. So we will see you all on Monday, if not prior to then. Thanks, staff, for joining us today. This meeting is adjourned. Have a great day.